So you just use the word super. And how many of us hear superfoods, look for the superfoods. But exactly what are the superfoods? So explain first what a superfood is before we start telling them about different ones.
So we'll just, the classification of a superfood is something that's super nutrient dense that has a lot of power to it, right? So if you can think of Superman, Superwoman, it's superfoods. So we'll chat about 4 or 5, I think, different superfoods and how they work and how tasty they can become, incorporating it into your new food plans.
And along with all the cruciferous vegetables, the word to me was bright colored vegetables. Stay at the outside of the store where the real food is and look for all of my, red and yellow and orange peppers and mushrooms too. So mushrooms comes under the category of superfoods?
Absolutely, the untalked about superfood.
Yeah.
So mushrooms, shiitake, Ganoderma, portobello, and don't forget your white button, which is your typical of what they put on salads. Mushrooms as a fungus really is now bringing the research based on mushrooms. It's doing 2 major things. Really, this is pretty impactful. The mushrooms, there's a compound in mushroom that actually modifies an enzyme or shuts down an enzyme that converts your testosterone into estrogen. Now, if you remember what Joan said before, estrogen is not too favorable for our body, and it's actually a cancer promoter for a lot of people, men and women, prostate cancer and so forth. But if you eat servings of mushrooms daily and weekly, you actually reduce that enzyme, and so you're not converting testosterone into estrogen. So it's pretty powerful. The other reason why it's so impactful, the research on mushrooms is showing that mushroom extract, or the nutrients that come from mushrooms, activate a white blood cell in your body called a natural killer cell. Natural killer cells go after 2 cells, cancer cells and cells infected by viruses. Has anybody had stress in here ever? Has anybody ever broken out or got a cold sore? You don't have to raise your hand, just think about it, when they're stressed. So the cortisol comes out, it destroys the natural killer cell, viruses take loose, right? Shingles and so forth. What if you have chronic stress all the time? Your internal terrain is breeding cancer development. So I can't tell you to get rid of your spouse or your kids. You should come to the camp every year and de-stress and have some fun. But make sure you're getting mushrooms into your diet. It's very powerful. Improves the immune system. It's anti-estrogen and anti-cancer.
All right. So one of the things we always have to get is protein. And I know a lot of people say, I'm going to go on a high protein, low carb, but it's really, you don't want to be spiking your insulin levels all the time, so you just want to look for good proteins. And surprisingly, eggs.
Eggs.
All right, so let's talk about, and I didn't know egg was one of the superfoods, but it is.
So you heard the term diabetes, right? Diabetes is a blood sugar dysfunction. Either you've created it or it's an autoimmune situation. But Joan brings up a good point about insulin, because insulin is a hormone that drives a lot of diseases: cancer, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's. So what we try to do, or what we would like you to do, is when you wake up in the morning, try to get away from the carbs and the sugary foods and go to protein. Egg is a superfood. Believe it or not, it's a superfood. So the protein in egg is one of the highest protein sources out there, albumin. It provides us with 2 eggs is really 150 grams of protein. And you don't have to worry about the yolk either, because according to the research, the yolk, which has very minimal cholesterol, does very little to your cholesterol level. So let's maybe get that out of your heads, because it's not going to affect your cholesterol. And
with me, we really needed to get protein into me. So of course, when he said, eat eggs in the morning, don't start with, he says all of us should start with protein, because it sets us up for wanting protein all day.
Yes.
Whereas if we start with carbs in the morning, it sets us up
for sugar cravings all day.
All right. And I used to start every single day with carbs, admittedly. And I said, okay, so like an egg white omelet? He said, no, you need that protein. So whether you're just doing eggs by themselves or something yummy like this, because are we going to let them guess what's in these?
Oh.
These deviled eggs that are being passed around? They're awesome? Really awesome? All right.
Obviously, we have the organic free-range eggs. Is there a difference between grain-fed feedlot animal foods or grass-fed on the range? Is there a difference? Yes, absolutely. When we talk about organic or free-range eggs, the essential amino acids that are in the yolk is far higher than grain-fed chickens who are given GMO soybeans and grains, which that's not a natural food source for them. It ends up in the eggs that you eat, so then we're ingesting things that aren't too healthful for us. So in the egg, which is a organic free-range egg, there's sweet potato. There's
In this?
Yes. So the filling is sweet potato, there's shallot, and there's some spices, and a little bit of mustard, which are all incredible foods. And the spices, if you think about spices as being medicinal, they are. Herbs are medicinal because they modify our internal cellular functions to reduce inflammation. You've all heard of inflammation, right? So they're foods that become inflammatory, bread, dairy, sugar.
We don't want any of those.
And there's foods that are anti-inflammatory, and these are some of the superfoods that we'd like to share with you. But it's a deviled egg with sweet potato and spice.
And by the way, I'm not eating any regular potatoes. And you guys all know that a regular potato, there's only nutrients in the skin. All the part on the inside is basically zero. I mean, you can eat it, you can put butter on it, but it's not doing anything for you. But I can eat sweet potatoes. And sweet potatoes are so delicious. So, I mean, there's some really great trade-offs.
And a point about the sweet potatoes, too, it's high in fiber, so it doesn't raise your blood sugar. And it's high in antioxidants like vitamin C and beta-carotene, so it's a super power food. As you know, antioxidants will help reduce the incidence of atherosclerosis and heart disease and cancers. So sweet potatoes are a great food to incorporate into your diet.
And when you go to the grocery store, there is a difference when you go to buy ground round. Like we all buy that because we're making, hamburgers, lasagna, whatever it is we're making. I, quite frankly, didn't really know there was a difference until you pointed it out and told me not to buy grain-fed beef, which is most of the ground round you find in the supermarket. But if you go and ask the butcher for some grass-fed ground round, they have it there. Most of the big supermarkets do, like up here, Hannaford's. You don't have to go to Whole Foods for it.
So the research on grain-fed versus grass-fed beef, the nutrient composition is absolutely completely different. So we can't lump all red meat into red meat. A Slim Jim is not really red meat, right? So if you can think about, bologna and all this other stuff, that's really not red meat. That's just processed whatever it is. But if you look at two pieces of pure protein, one that's grain-fed, soybean-fed, abused kind of livestock meat, and you compare it to grass-fed beef, the nutrient composition is unbelievable. Actually, what they're saying is grass-fed beef now has just as much essential omega-3 fatty acids in it that salmon does. So although society is is steering us away from meat, I disagree with it. I think that if you have small pieces of grass-fed beef, bison, and different things, as long as they're humanely processed and so forth, it's a good source of nutrition for us. People with anemias and weakness and different things, grass-fed beef is pretty powerful as far as its nutrient composition. The other thing that we talked about, Joan said, I still want to be able to eat some healthful protein. I still want to, as it's a summer, do some grilling. And I said, okay, let's talk about the grilling situation. So what you never want to eat is the black part of meat. Don't char or burn your meat, okay? So, I know.
Sorry.
They're like, how am I going to eat my ribs? So let's say you're doing a small piece of grass-fed beef or bison or something. My suggestion is to slow cook the meat on both sides, keep flipping, until it's cooked through, until it's the consistency and the medium raw,
medium rare, whatever you want.
Yep.
But you can do it, but just don't burn it on either side.
And if you're feeling a little conscious about meat and the detriments of meat, remember it's grass-fed beef, and what you do now is you take this recipe, cabbage or any other purple things, and you make a relish or you do a side dish with it, because those anthocyanins, which actually get rid of, that what they do is they neutralize a nasty compound that comes from heating meat. So
that's food pairing then.
Food pairing.
Okay, so do away with what happens with you when you're barbecuing meat. This is the way you food pair?
Yes. Well, I don't want you to think that you can just chow down and crunch down on the charred black crunchy stuff. But if you just think to slow cook meat and then pair your grass-fed meat or some natural meat source with the purple, you neutralize these heterocyclic amines, these nasty compounds that come from the meat that could be detrimental for us. So it's a great way to make all proteins that are heated and grilled super safe.
Yes, as I've gone through my chemotherapy and all of a sudden my red blood cell count went down and my white blood cell count and then my hemoglobin and then my platelets, I mean, he came along and, gave me all the sources for, good lean meats and red meats to build me back up. And we built my platelets up from 98 to 188 just in 1 week. And that was done through the foods that I'm choosing and eating.